I've had quite a few people asking about alkaline resistant mesh. So I thought I'd produce this video explaining where to use mesh and also how to adhere your tessera to the mesh. And I'm going to show you that right now. I've had a few people ask, why use mesh in a mosaic and what are the advantages of using mesh in a mosaic? Well, alkaline resistant mesh is widely used in mosaics, especially for jobs that you can do off-site. For instance, if you have a wall and it's say 3 meters by 2 meters and it's going to be covered in a mosaic and it might be in a very high traffic area, or it might be hard to get to, or it could be that it's going to be quite uncomfortable working there, whatever the case may be. By creating your design with the mesh, you're able to do it off-site. You're able to do it in your studio or your home and then transfer it to the site and install it. So instead of being at the site for say 3 or 4 weeks creating your mosaic, you create it on the mesh and then you transfer it to the site and then you install. And it's going to take you a day to install instead of saying, okay, well I need to be at the site for say 3 or 4 weeks. And if the weather's bad, that can hold you up. So by using mesh to create your mosaic on, you're going to actually save time in the long run, not only with traveling, but with the weather and with ease of doing it. Also doing it flat instead of up on a wall. Now, another advantage of the mesh is that if you are contributing to a project and you need to send a mosaic out in the mail, then it enables you to create your design on the mesh, you send it out in the mail, the person receives it, they open it up, and then they can go and install it straight away. So transferring the mesh around makes it a lot easier. Now, a few things you're going to need is a design. Now, some people will sketch a design on the mesh and use that. Some people will also, like me, print a design out. I've done this very simple flower. And what you do is you have the flower here, you sticky tape it down. Sorry about the noise. Just roughly sticky tape it down. You just don't want it to move, really. That's what it amounts to. And I'm sure your sticky tape will not be packaging tape like I have here, which is extremely wide. Then that's what we're going to be using for the design. Now, your design can be as complex or as bold as you want. It just depends on what you want to do. But either way, I find this is the easiest way. And then we put our piece of plastic over the top. Now, you may be saying, why are we putting a piece of plastic over the top? I'll explain that in a tick. So we just stick that down as well. Nothing like big, bulky, sticky tape. Okay, so that's secure. We don't want our design underneath to move, nor do we want the plastic to move. Then we stick the mesh over the top. Now, the reason why we are sticking the plastic down on top of the design is that when we apply a bit of glue on the back or adhesive on the back of the actual material that we're using, whether it's a vitreous tile or whether it's ceramic tile or whatever the case may be, once you apply a bit of adhesive on the back, the adhesive will stick to the mesh, but we don't want it to stick to the paper design on the underneath the mesh. So that's what the plastic's there for. And then when it's all dried, you can then just lift the mesh up and the adhesive will come straight off the plastic. So I'll stick this down. That flat. I want to keep it as flat as possible. Quite neat, isn't it? What I've done here is I've duplicated the design because all I need is the petals. Now, this doesn't have to be exact. I mean, you can cut out every individual petal if you want because they're slightly different, but this is just just show you, so I'm not going to worry about doing that. But you can also, like I said, sketch a design on the mesh if you want to do it that way. But the advantage of doing a colour design underneath is that you can see the colours. So if you're doing a design that's very specific in colours, then, you know, if this was a flower, which it is, but if this was a flower and it was like red, yellow, blue, green, black, you would be able to go, okay, so that one needs to be red, that one needs to be yellow, that needs to be green, that, you know, and so forth. So it just makes it a lot easier. So all I've done is I've duplicated the design, I've cut the petal out, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now put this onto a piece of tile and just draw around that, and then I'm going to then cut it out. And the same with the circle. The circle, I happen to have this container, and that is exactly the same size as the circle I need for the centre of the flower. So I'm going to do that as well. All right, don't forget when you're doing this, you need a dust mask, a P2 or an N95, and also protective eyewear. Okay. Now I found a good circle to do my centrepiece. I'm going to use this jar with buttons in. So I'm just going to put it on there. I'm going to trace around it. I'll put it to the side because I might be able to use this spare space for something else further down the track. You never know. Put it in there. It's a little rough, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to now get rid of the spare area. We don't need that. So I'm going to cut that there. Move that all out the way. Now, what I generally use is my double-wheeled nippers and the compound nippers, which are these ones here, for finiting it. I mean, you can use those instead of these if you want to, but you know, I use these just generally for finiting. So I like to cut out the bulk of the area. If you've watched some of my other videos, you will see me doing this pretty well. I don't know why I do it that way, just me. And then I just gradually go in. And when I cut circles or anything like this, I like to use my finger at the bottom to guide the nippers around, because you can get there and go in and out, but by using my finger at the base, I can just push it around with it, and it just makes it quicker. But that's just me. You know, everyone has their own way of doing something. There you go. There you go, that's my circle. And now what I'll do is I'll cut out the petals for this. And that's just a matter of doing what I did here, except I'll be tracing it on using my little stencil here. And then I'll cut these out, and I'll do this off camera because there's quite a few of them to do. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them to do. And then we'll come back and I'll show you what I do to adhere those petals onto the actual mesh and how much adhesive to use as well. Okay, I've cut out all the petals. I was going to cut out of one template and just duplicate for each one, but because they're all different, I decided to individually cut them all out. It took about half an hour, so that's not a big problem. Now, I'm going to be adhering the petals with thinset. Now, thinset is American terminology for cement-based adhesive. So if you're in Australia, you need to go into your store and ask for a cement-based adhesive. Don't ask for thinset. When you're applying the adhesive to the mesh, I like to use the same adhesive as to what I'm going to be mounting it. For instance, if this is being mounted onto a wall, an external wall outside, and my adhesive for that is going to be thin set, then I like to use thin set to adhere it to the mesh. I don't want to use weld bond and then use thin set for the adhesive when it's going on the wall. And for pretty well all my outdoor projects, I like to use thin set. It works really well. It's pretty well foolproof. It's sticky stuff, but by using the baggy system, it works really well. And I'll put a link up top here so that you can actually see how I make my thin set and also the Latticrete brand that I use and why I use that brand. I'm going to do the center, and you don't need much. Now we're only tacking it to the actual mesh. We don't want to plaster the whole thing in adhesive because that's going to be the job when you're installing it. That's going to be what your adhesive is going to do. But in this case, we're only tacking it, and we're only tacking it to keep it in place and also for transporting. So all I do is I just put just a few little dobs, and that's really about all you need. And then just push firmly down, and that's it. And then I'll go and do the others. And then after this is done, then you leave it, and then you come back and you then peel it off, or peel the mesh off the plastic. And that should come off really well because it won't stick to the plastic. And like I said, the job of this is just to hold it in place while you transport it and to make sure it doesn't fall off. And unfortunately, I don't have confidence in the sticky mesh that some people use. I find I would hate to do an important job and then find when I'm transporting in the car or I go to put it up, the tiles or whatever I'm using for the tessera falls off. Because let's face it, that would be a really bad thing to happen. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with self-adhesive, dust will also affect it and it can lose its tackiness. Plus it has a shelf life. So this is not doing anything but tacking it onto the mesh. Done that. Center that circle there a bit. There you go. So what we'll do is we'll leave that cure overnight, and then I'll come back tomorrow, we'll peel it off, cut it out and see how it goes. Okay, it's been 24 hours. Let's peel this off and see what it's like. And of course, you know, I've overdone the sticky tape. You don't really need that much tape on it. But it's just, that was the only tape I had here. You only really just need to stop it from moving, that's all. So just a tack pieces, just a couple of tack pieces will be fine. Okay. So that just comes off, and there you go. Hope you can see that. It's only just tacked on. Oh, I don't know what happened there. The camera just suddenly stopped, but luckily I caught that. Okay, back to this. By tacking it, that means that the adhesive that you use for installation will be the adhesive that really bonds it to the substrate. Okay, now what we do next is we just cut it out. A pair of scissors. And it's just roughly, doesn't have to be anything great. Well, there you go, it's all ready for installation. And you can use other adhesives besides thin set to actually adhere to mesh, but that's just my personal preference of adhesive. Well, I hope you've taken something away from this. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have any comments with regards to the process, or you have a better idea or something like that, then please put it down in the comment section of the YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next video. Enjoy.